Ever feel like the number on the scale is only telling you like half the story?
Oh, definitely. For so many people, it really is just part of the picture.
Because today we're diving into something really fascinating. Body recomposition.
Hmm.
The idea of actually losing fat and gaining muscle uh, at the same time.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a metabolic magic trick, right? Like trying to fill a bucket while simultaneously emptying it.
Exactly. It sounds counterintuitive.
It does. But the powerful insight here, and what we'll explore, is that body recomposition is not only possible, but, well, incredibly valuable for your long-term health.
Absolutely. And this isn't just about, aesthetics or fitting into a certain size. We're talking real, tangible improvements.
Like what, specifically?
Well, things like your energy levels, a more efficient metabolism, feeling stronger, and it even seems to influence your health span.
Like longevity.
That's a crucial point. It goes way beyond appearance.
And think about BMI, that go-to weight metric. It just lumps everything together. It really does. It doesn't distinguish between muscle and fat at all.
So you could have a healthy BMI, technically, but still carry a high percentage of body fat, which, according to some newer research, could be over 25% for men, maybe 30% for women, and that's a key indicator of metabolic health, regardless of the BMI number.
And that's the crucial thing to understand. Focusing just on weight can be really deceptive. Someone might lose weight, sure, but if they're also losing muscle mass in the process,
That's not the goal here.
no, that's not the metabolic win we're actually after. Body recomposition shifts our focus to the quality of that weight, that ratio of lean muscle to body fat.
Right. And just to really illustrate that point, I actually intentionally nudged my own body fat up to 26% for a while.
Wow, really? For research?
Yeah, all in the name of research for a project. And it really hammered home how that number on the scale wasn't reflecting my overall well-being at all.
I bet.
Let's just say I was very happy to reverse that experiment. But it does highlight that our body composition isn't fixed. We have agency here.
That's a great illustration. It's dynamic.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really unpack the dietary strategies for body recomposition. How what you eat, and maybe crucially when you eat it, plays such a pivotal role.
Exactly. We'll touch on exercise and supplements in a future discussion, but for this
It really
setting,
is all about the food.
yes, we're zeroing in on the fuel, mastering the nuances of like calorie intake and macronutrient manipulation is absolutely fundamental to achieving that desirable shift.
Okay, let's unpack that further then. Why should we even prioritize body composition over just, losing or gaining weight? What's the core benefit?
Well, the fundamental advantage, as we touched on, lies in that focus on the ratio of fat to muscle.
Right.
Two people weighing exactly the same can have vastly different health profiles,
Yeah.
all depending on their body composition.
Okay.
Imagine someone who's, say, 80 kilograms.
Yeah.
If they shed 5 kilograms of fat, but simultaneously build 5 kilograms of muscle,
The scale doesn't move.
the scale stays exactly the same. But their metabolic health, their energy expenditure, their overall vitality, that's likely to be significantly enhanced.
So it's a deeper, more fundamental kind of improvement than just watching a number go down.
Precisely. And the advantages go beyond just the immediate physical changes you might notice. There's actually increasing evidence linking a healthy body composition to longevity.
Really? Longevity.
Yes, and what we might call our biological age, basically. How well our bodies are functioning at a cellular level. A favorable ratio of lean mass to fat mass seems to be a strong indicator of a longer, healthier life.
Wow. Okay, now here's where that common question pops up, the one you mentioned earlier.
The contradiction.
Yeah. Many of us have heard, you need to eat more calories, a surplus to build muscle, and you need to eat less, a deficit to lose fat.
Mm-hmm. The traditional view.
So body recomposition seems to be navigating this apparent conflict. How does it work? What's the key to walking that tightrope?
That really is the central puzzle of recomposition, isn't it?
Yeah.
Traditionally, yeah, muscle growth is fueled by that caloric surplus. You need extra energy, extra building blocks.
Right.
And conversely, fat loss typically needs that caloric deficit, so your body starts using its stored fat for energy.
Okay.
Recomposition cleverly orchestrates a balance. It's done through subtle adjustments in calorie intake, strategic nutrient timing, and a really targeted focus on specific macronutrients, especially protein.
So less about big swings, more about fine-tuning.
Exactly. It's much more about fine-tuning than drastic measures.
So we're generally not talking about, like, severe calorie restriction or those huge bulking phases you sometimes hear about?
Generally, no. For successful body recomposition, usually a slight calorie deficit is the way to go. often somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 5% below your individual maintenance
Excuse me,
level.
5%. That seems quite small.
It is. Compared to typical weight loss diets, it's a much more moderate deficit. Because large deficits, while they're effective for shedding fat quickly, also increase the risk of muscle loss.
Which completely undermines the goal here.
Exactly. It undermines the recomposition goal. And conversely, while a big calorie surplus can promote muscle growth, it often comes with the unwanted side effect of, well, increased fat storage too.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So if we're aiming for this sort of delicate equilibrium, the slight deficit, how do we actually know if we're moving in the right direction? It feels like we need some way to track things.
Absolutely. You know that saying, what gets measured gets managed.
Mm-hmm.
It's particularly relevant here. Now, this isn't about becoming obsessive with numbers or metrics.
Right, not getting bogged down.
No, but rather using key indicators to monitor your progress and, importantly, refine your approach as you go.
So what specific metrics should we be paying attention to then?
Well, tracking your overall calorie intake is fundamental.
Yeah.
And perhaps even more critically, tracking your protein consumption.
Okay. Calories and protein.
Now, meticulously weighing every single food item that might not be sustainable or practical for everyone long term.
Yeah, that can be tough.
But cultivating an awareness of your daily intake is essential. Unfortunately, technology offers some pretty practical solutions these days.
Like what?
There are now quite sophisticated AI-powered apps. They can estimate the calorie and macronutrient content of your meals just by analyzing a photo you take.
Oh, wow, really? Just from a picture?
Yeah, it can be surprisingly accurate, especially if your dietary patterns are reasonably consistent. It's often a much more user-friendly approach than detailed weighing day in, day out.
That sounds way more doable.
And then periodically assessing your body fat percentage maybe at home with reliable tools or perhaps occasionally with a professional that can provide really invaluable insights into whether you're actually shifting that muscle to fat ratio in the right direction.
Okay, so we've got some actionable ways to keep tabs on things. Now let's get down to the practicalities. Roughly, how many calories should someone be aiming for to achieve this body recomposition?
So, as we discussed, that slight calorie deficit, around 5% below your estimated maintenance level, is generally a good starting point for most people.
And how do you figure out your maintenance level?
Well, there are plenty of online calculators, or those AI-powered apps we just mentioned, can often help you estimate your personal maintenance calorie needs. That's basically the amount of energy your body burns just at rest and during your typical daily activities.
Okay.
So for instance, if your estimated maintenance is around, say, 2,000 calories per day,
Then you'd aim for about 1,900.
exactly, around 1,900 calories per day would be the target to facilitate recomposition. A consistent, gentle nudge downwards.
Got it. But the material we looked at also highlighted two different strategies for, distributing those calories through the week. A weekly approach and a daily one. Can you break those down for us?
Certainly. The weekly distribution strategy involves creating that overall 5% weekly calorie deficit, right?
Yeah.
But you strategically vary your intake throughout the week.
How so?
On days when you're doing resistance training, lifting weights, for example.
Your workout days.
Yeah, your lifting days, you'd consume slightly more calories, perhaps closer to your maintenance level, maybe even a tiny surplus, specifically to support muscle recovery and growth.
Okay, fuel the work.
Right. Conversely, on your rest days, or days when you're maybe just doing cardiovascular exercise.
Like a run or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On those days, you'd consume fewer calories, thereby increasing the deficit slightly and promoting more fat loss on those specific days.
So kind of cycling the calories based on activity.
Precisely. So using our 2,000 calorie maintenance example again, you might aim for, say, 50 calories on your lifting days, and then maybe drop down to 1,900 or even a bit less on your non-lifting days. The key is ensuring you still hit that overall weekly average deficit.
That makes intuitive sense. Fueling the muscle building when the demand is highest and creating a bit more of an energy gap when it's not. Okay. And what about the daily distribution method?
So the daily distribution approach, which often ties into concepts like time-restricted eating or chronutrition.
Which we'll get to in a moment.
Yes. This involves consuming roughly the same slight calorie deficit each day. So around 1,900 calories every day in our example. However, the timing of when you eat those calories becomes paramount.
Ah, okay. So the when matters more here.
Exactly. The underlying principle is to concentrate your food consumption around your training sessions. The goal is to maximize the anabolic response, that muscle building process, right when you need it.
After the workout.
Primarily, yes. And then leverage the periods when you're not eating, your fasting periods, to enhance catabolism or fat breakdown.
Interesting. So it's really not just the total quantity of calories anymore, but the when becomes a key lever you can pull for body recomposition.
It absolutely can be.
That leads us perfectly into talking about chronutrition and intermittent fasting. What exactly is the core idea behind chronutrition? Sounds a bit technical.
It sounds technical, but the concept is fairly straightforward. At its heart, chronutrition is basically the science exploring how the timing of your food intake can influence your metabolic processes and, as a result, your body's composition. It's really about aligning your eating patterns with your body's natural 24-hour cycle, the circadian rhythm. It's about working with your body's internal clock, not against it.
And the material mentioned a specific study, I think, something about breakfast versus dinner timing.
Yes, that was a noteworthy study from 2013. It involved women who were classified as overweight. They found that the group who consumed a larger portion of their daily calories at breakfast and a smaller portion at dinner,
Lost more weight.
they experienced greater weight loss, yes. And this was compared to a group who did the opposite. Big dinner, small breakfast, even when their total calorie intake and the types of food they ate were identical.
Wow, same calories, different results just based on timing.
Exactly. And subsequent research has largely supported these findings. It suggests that consuming a greater proportion of your calories later in the day can potentially impede weight loss efforts or make fat storage a bit easier.
Why would that be, though? What's the biological mechanism that makes timing so impactful even if the total calories stay the same?
Well, there are several interconnected factors likely at play. One key factor is our body's sensitivity to insulin.
The hormone that regulates blood sugar.
Right. Insulin sensitivity tends to be higher in the morning hours. This means our bodies are generally more efficient at processing glucose and utilizing nutrients for energy and muscle repair earlier in the day.
Okay, more efficient processing in the morning.
Plus, our metabolic rate, the speed at which we burn calories, is generally more active during the daytime compared to the evening and nighttime hours when we're winding down.
Makes sense.
There's also some evidence suggesting our digestive capacity might be slightly reduced later in the day. And eating really out of sync with our natural rhythms, like having a large, heavy meal right before bed, has been shown to negatively impact glucose tolerance and insulin metabolism.
So the general advice then, based on chronutrition, would be to sort of front load your calories, eat more earlier in the day, and taper off.
That's the general principle, yes. Now, practical, real-world life might make perfect adherence difficult for everyone.
Sure, social events, work schedules.
Of course. But consciously aiming to consume a larger portion of your daily calories earlier in the day can be a valuable strategy. It might help minimize unnecessary fat storage and potentially optimize muscle growth by providing fuel when your body is most receptive.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now let's delve into intermittent fasting, or EAF. How does this fit into the body recomposition picture?
Intermittent fasting can be a highly effective tool for body recomposition, primarily because of its influence on insulin levels.
How so?
Well, during the fasting window, when you're not consuming calories, your insulin levels naturally decline.
Okay.
Lower insulin levels essentially make it easier for your body to access its stored fat reserves for energy, so it directly promotes fat loss.
Right. And what's a typical or maybe recommended fasting schedule for someone whose main goal is body recomposition specifically, not just weight loss?
That's a good distinction. For body recomposition, a 168 fasting protocol is often a practical and sustainable approach.
So 16 hours fasting, 8 hours eating window.
Exactly. A 16-hour fast followed by an 8-hour window where you consume your calories. This typically allows for, say, 3 meals within that designated eating window, which helps with getting enough protein distributed.
Okay. And why not longer fasts?
Longer fasting periods, like 20 hours or even alternate day fasting, while they can be beneficial for significant overall weight loss, might not be optimal for supporting muscle growth in the context of body recomposition.
Why is that?
Because prolonged calorie restriction could potentially hinder muscle protein synthesis, making it harder to build or even maintain muscle mass while you're trying to lose fat.
Ah, okay. So that 168 is kind of a sweet spot for recomposition.
It often seems to be, yes. It balances fat loss promotion with providing enough feeding time to support muscle.
That's a really important distinction. So it's a different approach than someone maybe fasting purely for dropping pounds quickly. How can we tell if maybe we're overdoing the fasting, if our goal is to build muscle while losing fat?
That's a crucial point to monitor. Your energy levels during the fasting period can be a pretty good indicator.
How you feel?
Yeah. If you consistently experience significant drops in energy, feelings of excessive fatigue, or you find it really difficult to perform your workouts
It
effectively.
just feel drained all the time.
Exactly. That might suggest that your fasting window is perhaps too long for your body in this context. It could be hindering your body's ability to recover properly and build muscle effectively.
So that persistent low energy, it could be a signal to maybe shorten the fast a bit. Pull back from 16 hours to maybe 14.
Potentially, yes. It's about listening to your body and adjusting. That persistent low energy can definitely be a signal to shorten your fasting period.
Okay, that's a really helpful self-assessment tool. Great. Now we've covered the how much to eat, that slight deficit, and the then when thinking about nutrition and IF. Let's shift our focus now squarely onto the what. Specifically, the really strong emphasis on protein in the material we reviewed. Why is protein so absolutely key for body recomposition?
Well, optimizing anabolism, that's the physiological process of building new tissues, particularly muscle.
Building.
Right, building up. That is absolutely central to successful body recomposition. And protein serves as the fundamental building block for muscle tissue. So getting adequate intake is simply non-negotiable if you want to build or even maintain muscle while losing fat.
And the recommendation was higher than usual, right?
Yes, for body recomposition, a higher protein intake than the standard dietary recommendations is generally advised. The typical range suggested is somewhere between 1.6 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight per day.
Okay, 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilo. That is noticeably more than the usual guidelines, isn't it?
It is. And the scientific evidence strongly supports its benefits specifically for positively influencing body composition.
What does the research show?
Numerous studies have demonstrated that increased protein intake, especially when it's combined with resistance training,
Lifting weights.
yes, it leads to greater gains in lean muscle mass and often a more significant reduction in body fat compared to lower protein intakes, even when calories are matched.
So it directly helps shift that ratio.
Exactly. And interestingly, some research has even observed favorable changes in body composition with increased protein intake without a structured exercise program.
Really? Even without exercise?
Yes, although the effects are definitely much more pronounced when paired with resistance training. Plus, there's another factor. Protein has a higher thermic effect of food compared to fats and carbohydrates.
Meaning it takes more energy to digest.
Correct. Your body actually expends more energy digesting and processing protein. So a higher protein diet can contribute to a slight increase in your overall daily calorie expenditure. It's a small effect, but it adds up.
Okay, so it's a two-pronged benefit, really. Provides the raw materials for muscle growth and might even help us burn a few extra calories just processing it.
Precisely.
Now, what about the timing of that protein consumption? The material specifically mentioned aiming for, I think it was 20-30 grams after exercise.
Yes, that's a key recommendation. Consuming around 20 to 30 grams of high-quality protein in the period immediately following your workouts is considered crucial for optimizing muscle protein synthesis.
That's the repair and growth process.
Exactly, the repair and growth of your muscle fibers after they've been stressed by exercise.
Mm-hmm.
You want protein that's ideally rich in essential amino acids, particularly leucine.
Leucine. Why leucine specifically?
Leucine seems to act as a key trigger for muscle protein synthesis. There's this concept called the leucine threshold, which suggests you need a certain amount of leucine, generally thought to be around 2.5 grams, to maximally stimulate that muscle growth response.
Oh, okay. And that's why some supplements focus on it.
Yes, that's often why branched-chain amino acid BCAA supplements, for instance, are formulated to contain roughly that amount of leucine per serving. They're trying to hit that threshold. Animal-based proteins like whey, eggs, meat, they tend to be naturally rich in leucine too.
Got it. Now, what happens if we consume more than that 30 grams of protein in a single meal or right after a workout? Is that extra just wasted?
Well, wasted might be too strong a word. Your body can certainly digest and absorb more than 30 grams of protein at one time. That's not really the issue.
Yep.
However, the evidence suggests there seems to be a limit, or perhaps a point of diminishing returns, on how much your muscles can effectively utilize for protein synthesis in a single burst following one meal.
So the muscle building machinery gets saturated.
Kinda, yeah. The excess amino acids beyond what's needed for immediate muscle repair and building are likely to be oxidized, basically, used for other metabolic processes, including energy production, rather than being directly incorporated into new muscle tissue right then and there.
I see. So just downing a massive 60-gram protein shake might not be twice as good as a 30-gram one for muscle growth right after training.
Probably not in terms of the immediate muscle protein synthesis response. Therefore, a potentially more effective strategy for maximizing muscle growth over the course of the day is to distribute your total protein intake relatively evenly,
How so?
aiming for those 20-30 gram servings approximately every 3 to 4 hours throughout your eating window.
Spreading it out.
Exactly. With a particular focus, of course, on getting one of those servings in the post-workout window. This approach helps to keep muscle protein synthesis elevated more consistently throughout the day, rather than just one big spike.
And that relates to the anabolic window idea.
Yes, precisely. The concept of the anabolic window suggests that after exercise, your muscles are particularly receptive or sensitized to amino acids for repair and growth for a certain period. Hitting that window with protein is key.
Okay, so more frequent, moderate doses of protein seem to be the smart play, especially hitting that post-workout window. Now, thinking about increasing protein intake for recomposition, how much extra protein, beyond what someone might typically eat, are we talking about needing to actually see these benefits?
That's a practical question. Some research indicates that incorporating an additional, say, 1 gram of protein for every 3 kilograms of your body weight, compared to whatever your baseline intake was, can lead to noticeable improvements in body composition.
Okay, can you give an example?
Sure. So for someone weighing 75 kilograms, or about 165 pounds, that would translate to roughly an extra 25 grams of protein per day on top of what they were already eating.
Just 25 grams extra. That doesn't sound like a huge amount.
It doesn't, but consistency matters. However, there's a crucial point here. To facilitate fat loss while you're increasing your protein intake, you'll likely need to make slight adjustments elsewhere. Meaning you probably need to slightly reduce your intake of other macronutrients, either fats or carbohydrates, or a bit of both, to ensure you maintain that overall slight calorie deficit we talked about earlier. You can't just add protein calories on top and expect fat loss.
Right, you have to make room for it in the calorie budget.
Exactly. Now, regarding the upper limit of how much extra protein is beneficial, the research suggests it appears to be somewhere around 1.3 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, more than your previous consumption level.
Okay, 1.3 grams per kilo extra. Can you translate that?
Using our 75 kilogram person again. If they were previously consuming, let's say, a standard 1 gram of protein per kilogram, so 75 grams total,
Yeah.
increasing their intake by about 1.3 grams per kilo would mean adding roughly another 100 grams of protein per day. 1.3 by 75 equals 97.5. So they'd be aiming for around 2.3 grams per kilo total in this scenario.
Wow. Okay, so that's a significant increase, potentially doubling their intake or more.
It can be, depending on their starting point, but interestingly, engaging in regular resistance exercise seems to increase your body's capacity to effectively utilize that protein for muscle growth. Exercise essentially makes your body better at using the protein you give it for building muscle, potentially pushing that upper limit even higher for trained individuals.
That makes sense. The stimulus from training creates the demand.
Precisely.
Okay, that's really valuable practical information on protein quantity and timing, but the source material did include an important kind of caveat or long-term perspective regarding very high protein intake.
Yes, that's an important point to bring up, especially from a medical and longevity standpoint. While a higher protein intake is effective for achieving body recomposition,
It might not be ideal forever.
well, consistently maintaining a very high protein intake, particularly from animal sources, over extended periods, years and years, is generally not advised for everyone when considering long-term health and potentially longevity.
Why is that? Are there risks?
Some research links very high long-term animal protein intake to certain health concerns or markers associated with aging. It's an area of ongoing research, but the general recommendation is often caution with extremes long-term.
So what's the advice then?
The advice is often to utilize this higher protein strategy as a targeted approach, a tool, specifically to achieve a healthier body composition, get to that goal of greater lean muscle mass and lower body fat.
Use it strategically.
Exactly. And then once you've achieved that improved composition, potentially transition back to a more balanced dietary pattern. This might involve a more moderate protein intake overall, perhaps with a greater emphasis on plant-based protein sources for sustained long-term health and well-being.
That's a really crucial nuance. It's a phase to reach a goal, not necessarily a lifelong prescription for everyone.
Yes. And it's important to remember, too, that common supplemental forms of protein, like whey protein and egg protein, are also derived from animal sources, so they count towards that total.
Right. Good point. Okay, so just to quickly summarize the key dietary principles we've really unpacked here for achieving body recomposition.
Okay, let's recap. We've covered the fundamental importance of shifting focus from just the number on the scale to
Yeah.
your underlying body composition, that muscle to fat ratio.
Right. Measure what matters.
Exactly. Then the value of tracking your progress using metrics like calorie and especially protein intake, maybe using those helpful apps, but without obsession. We talked about aiming for that slight, consistent calorie deficit around 5% below maintenance.
Gentle deficit.
Yes. And strategically timing your meals, considering chronutrition, maybe front-loading calories, and potentially using intermittent fasting like the 168 protocol.
Okay.
And centrally, prioritizing a higher protein intake, somewhere in that 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram range, with strategic timing getting 20-30 grams post-workout and distributing intake throughout the day.
Don't forget the longevity caveat on super high protein forever.
Absolutely. Using it as a tool, then potentially moderating for the long haul.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive, truly. So much practical advice on the diet side.
It's the foundation, really.
And you mentioned that our next discussion is going to build right on this, tackling the other essential components.
Yes. Next time, we'll dive into the exercise strategies that best support recomposition, the potential role of specific supplements, the crucial importance of optimizing sleep.
Oh, sleep is huge.
It really is.
Yeah.
And maybe even touch on some of those more advanced techniques you hinted at earlier, things like cold exposure, maybe microbiome modulation, perhaps even future possibilities like genetic therapies.
Wow. Okay. I'm already looking forward to that next deep dive. Sounds fascinating.
Absolutely. Because it's really the synergistic effect, how all these different elements work together, diet, exercise, sleep, recovery, that truly unlocks the potential for significant and sustainable body recomposition.
Fantastic. Well, if you listening found this information valuable, please do share it. Share it with your friends, your workout partners, or just anyone you know who's interested in understanding the real science behind changing their body composition for the better.
Spread the knowledge.
Definitely. And now, just for a final thought to leave you with, you now possess a much more nuanced understanding of your body's inner workings. You see the power of focusing on what truly matters for your health beyond that often misleading number on the scale. So maybe take some time to consider, how might you start implementing even just one or two of these dietary strategies? And what specific questions does this raise for you as we prepare to explore the exercise and other factors in our next discussion? Food for thought.